the distant echo of a child's cry carried on the desert wind, stopping Ryder Galloway mid-stride as he guided his horse along the rugged canyon path. The year was 1873, and the Arizona Territory's unforgiving landscape had claimed many lives, but that sound, that unmistakable wail of an infant, didn't belong among the whistling winds and scattered stones of Dead Man's Canyon. "You hear that, Buck?" Ryder whispered to his chestnut stallion, whose ears had already pricked forward. The horse snorted, pawing at the dusty ground as the sound came again, more desperate this time. Ryder's weathered hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip. At 32, he'd seen enough of the frontier's dangers to know that not everything was as it seemed. 7 years as a ranch hand outside Gold Hill had taught him caution, but something about that cry pulled at him like a physical force. He dismounted, tethering Buck to a scraggly mesquite tree. "Stay put," he murmured, though the horse had never disobeyed him in the 5 years they'd been together. Ryder moved carefully, his boots finding silent purchase on the rocky terrain as he followed the sound. The crying grew louder as he rounded a bend in the narrow canyon, and then he saw her, a young woman huddled against the red rock wall, clutching a bundle to her chest. Her dress was torn and dusty, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face. Blood had dried on her temple, and her eyes, when they found his, held equal measures of fear and defiance. The infant in her arms continued to wail, tiny fists punching at the thin blanket wrapped around it. The woman tried to scramble backward as Ryder approached, wincing in pain as she moved. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse. She couldn't have been more than 25, Ryder guessed, though hardship had a way of aging people in these parts. Ryder raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you, madam. Name's Ryder Galloway. I work at the Silvercrest Ranch near Gold Hill." He nodded toward her leg, which she held at an awkward angle. "Looks like you're hurt." The baby's cries intensified, and Ryder could see the woman's strength was failing. Her arms trembled as she tried to comfort the child. "I've got nowhere to go," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "They'll find me." Ryder took another step forward, crouching down to her level. "I've got you," he said gently. "Both of you, if you'll let me help." Her eyes, startlingly blue against her dirt-smudged face, searched his. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she gave a small nod. "Zadie," she said quietly. "Zadie Blackburn, and this is Emma." She looked down at the baby, whose cries had softened to whimpers. "How long have you been out here, Miss Blackburn?" Ryder asked, shrugging out of his coat and offering it to her. 2 days, I think, lost track after. She trailed off, her gaze darting nervously toward the mouth of the canyon. "After what?" Ryder asked, though he had a feeling he knew. Raiders may be outlaws. The territory was full of desperate men. Stagecoach was attacked, everyone else. She swallowed hard. "I grabbed Emma and ran. One of them shot at us. The bullet just grazed me, but I fell down the embankment, my ankle." She glanced down at her swollen left ankle. Ryder nodded grimly. "We need to get you both to safety. Can you ride?" Fear flashed across her face. "They might still be looking." "My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here. We'll take the back trails." He reached for the baby. "May I, just while I help you up?" After a moment's hesitation, Zadie transferred the bundle to his arms. The little girl, who couldn't have been more than a few months old, blinked up at him with eyes the same shade of blue as her mother's. Something shifted in Ryder's chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Hello there, little lady," he murmured. The infant seemed to study him, her cries subsiding to curious coos. When he looked up, Zadie was watching him with surprise. She doesn't usually take to strangers. "I've got that effect on the ladies," Ryder said with a slight smile, hoping to ease her tension. It worked. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Helping Zadie to her feet proved difficult. She bit back a cry of pain when she tried to put weight on her injured ankle. "This won't work," Ryder said, frowning. "I'm going to have to carry you to my horse." She hesitated, then nodded. "Emma first." Ryder returned the baby to her and then, with as much gentleness as his rough hands could manage, scooped Zadie into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and he could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of her dress. The baby nestled between them, quieter now. Buck watched their approach with curious eyes but remained steady as Ryder carefully seated Zadie in the saddle. "I'll walk alongside," he said, handing her the reins. "You focus on holding the little one." "Mr. Galloway," she began. "Ryder," he corrected. "Ryder," she amended. "Why are you helping us? You don't know me." He looked up at her, this stranger who had tumbled into his solitary life like a star falling from the sky. "Out here, madam, we help each other. It's how we survive." He paused. "Besides, my ma would haunt me forever if I left a woman and baby alone in this canyon." As they started their slow journey back to the ranch, Ryder kept his hand on Buck's bridle, guiding the horse carefully over the uneven terrain. He found himself stealing glances at Zadie and her daughter. There was a story there, one that likely didn't end with a stagecoach robbery, but for now, it was enough that they were alive. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Ryder knew they wouldn't make it back to the ranch before nightfall. "There's a line shack about an hour from here," he said. "We'll stop there for the night." Zadie nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Do you think they followed us?" "If they did, they're mighty quiet about it," Ryder replied, "but we'll keep watch just in case." They traveled in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of Buck's hooves on the rocky ground and the occasional soft murmur Zadie made to Emma. Ryder found himself wondering about this woman's life before their paths crossed. She spoke like someone educated, and despite her current state, there was a dignity about her that suggested she wasn't accustomed to running for her life. "Where were you headed?" he asked eventually. "On the stagecoach." Zadie was quiet for so long that Ryder thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice was soft. "Tucson, I have had a cousin there." Ryder nodded, not pressing further. Everyone in the West had secrets, and most had reasons for leaving their old lives behind. He'd respect hers, at least until he was sure she and the baby weren't bringing trouble to his door. The line shack appeared as the last light was fading from the sky, a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace and a small corral for horses. Ryder helped Zadie dismount, supporting her weight as she hobbled inside. The interior was sparse but clean. A narrow cot stood against one wall, a rough-hewn table and chair in the center, and a few shelves stocked with basic provisions. "It's not much," Ryder said, lighting a lantern that hung from a ceiling beam. "It's perfect," Zadie replied, sinking onto the cot with Emma still in her arms. The baby had been remarkably quiet during their journey, but now she began to fuss, small face scrunching up. "She's probably hungry," Zadie said, a note of worry entering her voice. "I don't have anything for her." "There's cow's milk in the cold box," Ryder said, moving to check the small storage area built into the ground beneath the shack. "And some honey to sweeten it. Not ideal for a baby, but it'll do for tonight." He busied himself preparing a makeshift bottle from supplies in the shack, heating the milk slightly over a small fire he built in the fireplace. When he turned back, Zadie was watching him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You seem to know something about babies," she observed. Ryder handed her the bottle, a tin cup with a clean handkerchief secured over the top. "My sister had 4, I helped with all of them." "Where is she now?" "Back east, Ohio." He didn't elaborate on why he was here and she was there. Some stories were better left untold. "Let me take a look at that ankle while the little one eats." Zadie hesitated, then nodded. She shifted on the cot, extending her injured leg while cradling Emma with the makeshift bottle. Ryder knelt, gently removing her torn boot and torn stocking. The ankle was swollen and beginning to bruise, but when he carefully manipulated it, Zadie didn't cry out. "Not broken, I don't think," he said. "Bad sprain, though, we should bind it." He found a clean shirt in his saddlebag and tore it into strips, then wrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency. Zadie watched his hands move, seemingly fascinated by their gentleness despite their size and roughness. "Thank you," she said when he finished, "for everything." Ryder nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You need to eat something too. I'll make us some supper." He prepared a simple meal of beans and jerky, adding some dried apples he found on the shelf. When he glanced back at Zadie, she had fallen asleep sitting up, Emma still nursing at the improvised bottle. Moving quietly, Ryder took the nearly empty cup from her hand and lifted the baby. Emma blinked at him sleepily. "Let's let your mama rest," he whispered, cradling the tiny girl against his chest. He walked slowly around the small cabin, patting her back as he'd seen his sister do with her children. Emma gave a small burp, then nestled her head against his shoulder. The feeling that surged through him was unexpected, protective, fierce, and tender all at once. It had been years since he'd allowed himself to feel anything so strongly. Not since Catherine had died in childbirth, taking their unborn son with her. 7 years ago now, though sometimes it felt like yesterday, Ryder pushed the memories away. This woman and her child weren't his responsibility, not really. He'd get them safely to town tomorrow, find someone who could help them get to Tucson, and that would be that. He'd return to his solitary life at the ranch, and they'd be a brief, strange interlude he'd eventually forget. But as Emma's tiny fingers curled around one of his, Ryder suspected he was lying to himself. Morning came with golden light filtering through the shack's single window. Ryder, who had spent the night in a chair by the door, his rifle across his lap, woke to find Zadie already up. She sat on the edge of the cot, Emma in her lap, singing softly to the baby. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word, Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." Her voice was sweet and clear, and Ryder remained still, reluctant to interrupt the moment. But Emma spotted him and gave a delighted coo, waving her little arms. Zadie looked up, a flush coloring her cheeks. "Good morning. I didn't realize you were awake." "Just now," he said, stretching his stiff limbs. "How's the ankle?" She flexed her foot tentatively. "Better, I think, still sore, but I can put some weight on it." "Good, we'll head out after breakfast. It's about 2 hours to the ranch from here." He moved to the fireplace, stirring the embers back to life. "From there, we can decide what's best to do." Zadie's expression clouded. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Ryder said simply. "How's the little one this morning?" "Hungry again, she always is." Zadie smiled down at her daughter. Ryder prepared another bottle for Emma and a breakfast of coffee and hardtack for themselves. As they ate, he found himself studying Zadie more closely in the morning light. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and a determined chin. Despite the dirt and blood from her ordeal, she was beautiful in a way that made him uncomfortable. "What?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Just wondering about your story," he replied honestly. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Zadie was silent for a long moment, feeding Emma with one hand while sipping her coffee with the other. Finally, she sighed. "My husband died 6 months ago. Influenza. Emma was only 2 weeks old." She swallowed hard. "James owned a small business in San Francisco. After he died, I discovered he had debts, many debts. The creditors took everything." Ryder nodded, understanding dawning. "So you were going to your cousin in Tucson to start over?" "Yes, Thomas wrote that he could find work for me as a schoolteacher." Her lips curved in a sad smile. "I was a teacher before I married James." "What about Emma's grandparents, your family?" "My parents died years ago. James's father disowned him when he married me. I wasn't." She hesitated. "Suitable." Ryder wondered what made a woman as refined as Zadie Blackburn unsuitable. But he didn't pry further. Everyone had their reasons for coming west. His own had involved a broken heart and the need to put as much distance as possible between himself and the memories. "Well," he said after a moment, "let's get you both to safety first. Then we'll figure out the rest." They departed the line shack an hour later, Ryder having insisted Zadie ride Buck while he walked alongside. Emma was secured to her mother's chest with a makeshift sling Ryder had fashioned from another spare shirt. The morning was clear and cool, the desert landscape seemingly peaceful. But Ryder remained alert, his hand never straying far from his gun. If the men who attacked the stagecoach were still searching for survivors for witnesses, they wouldn't be safe until they reached the ranch. "Tell me about Gold Hill," Zadie said as they traveled, clearly trying to distract herself from worry. "Not much to tell. Small town, about 500 people. Got its name from a gold strike in '59 that played out pretty quick. Now it's mostly ranching country." Ryder guided Buck around a patch of rough terrain. "The Silver Crest is one of the bigger spreads owned by Horace Jenkins. Good man, fair." "And you've worked there 7 years," Ryder nodded. "Started as just a hand, now I manage the place. Horace is getting on in years, can't ride like he used to." "You like it there?" "It's good work," he replied, which wasn't exactly an answer. Truth was, he'd chosen the life because it was solitary. Because it hurt less than being around families and children and reminders of what he'd lost. They traveled in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythm of Buck's hooves and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Ryder found himself stealing glances at Zadie and Emma, wondering about the strange twist of fate that had brought them into his life. Part of him, the cautious part, warned that they represented complications he didn't need. But another part, a part he thought had died with Catherine, felt oddly alive in their presence. They crested a rise, and the Silvercrest Ranch came into view in the valley below a sprawling main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals, surrounded by good grazing land. Several cowboys were visible in the distance, moving cattle. "Home, sweet home," Ryder said, more to himself than to Zadie. As they approached, a figure on horseback detached from the group of cowboys and rode toward them. Ryder recognized the distinctive silhouette of his friend and fellow ranch hand, Charlie Dunn. "That you, Ryder?" Charlie called as he neared. "Thought you weren't due back till," he broke off, noticing Zadie and the baby. His eyebrows shot up nearly to the brim of his hat. "Charlie," Ryder greeted him. "This is Miss Zadie Blackburn and her daughter, Emma. They had some trouble out at Dead Man's Canyon. I'm bringing them in." Charlie touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, little madam." His eyes, however, were full of questions as they returned to Ryder. "Is Horace at the house?" Ryder asked. "Yep, so's his daughter. Elizabeth arrived yesterday from Denver." Charlie's tone conveyed what he didn't say outright, that Elizabeth Jenkins had made no secret of her interest in Ryder on her previous visits, despite his lack of encouragement. "Well then," Ryder said, feeling suddenly awkward. "We'd best get up to the house. Miss Blackburn's ankle is injured and they both need proper food and rest." Charlie nodded, falling in beside them. "Raiders?" he asked quietly. "Stagecoach robbery," Ryder confirmed. "No survivors except these two," Charlie let out a low whistle. "Probably the Mackenzie gang. They've been hitting the Tucson line hard lately." Ryder nodded grimly. "That's what I was thinking. Sheriff should hear about this, might want to organize a posse." "Tomorrow," Ryder said. "Today we get them settled." They reached the main house, a 2-story structure built of adobe and timber that stood in stark contrast to the humble line shack where they'd spent the night. As they approached, the front door opened and Horace Jenkins emerged, a stout man with a shock of white hair and a full beard to match. "Galloway, wasn't expecting you back so." Like Charlie, he stopped short at the sight of Zadie and Emma. Unlike Charlie, he recovered quickly, his face breaking into a broad smile. "Well now, who do we have here?" Before Ryder could answer, a second figure appeared in the doorway, a tall woman with auburn hair piled atop her head, wearing a fashionable traveling suit that must have cost more than Ryder earned in 6 months. "Ryder," she said, her voice carrying a note of proprietary interest that made him wince inwardly. "What a lovely surprise." "Miss Jenkins," he replied formally, then turned to Horace. "Mr. Jenkins, this is Miss Zadie Blackburn and her daughter." Their stagecoach was attacked near Dead Man's Canyon. Miss Blackburn is injured and they've had a difficult couple of days. Horace's expression sobered. Of course, bring them in right away." He turned to his daughter. "Elizabeth, have Maria prepare a room and a bath." Elizabeth's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled as they swept over Zadie. "Of course, father, right away." She disappeared back into the house. Ryder helped Zadie dismount, supporting her weight as she hobbled toward the entrance. Emma, who had been quiet for most of the journey, began to fuss. "She's probably hungry again," Zadie said, sounding apologetic. "And I'm afraid I don't have—" "Don't you worry, my dear," Horace interrupted kindly. "Maria has raised 5 children. She'll know just what to do." As they entered the cool interior of the ranch house, Ryder felt a strange reluctance to let Zadie go. These past 24 hours had created an unexpected bond between them, forged in danger and mutual dependence. Once she was safely inside, under Horace's protection, Ryder's role in her story would be largely over. A middle-aged Mexican woman appeared, clucking sympathetically at the sight of Zadie's condition and immediately taking charge. "This way, Senora. We will take care of you and the pequeña." Zadie turned to Ryder, her blue eyes holding his for a long moment. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found us." "You're safe now," he replied. "That's what matters." She nodded, then allowed Maria to lead her down the hallway, Emma still clutched to her chest. Ryder watched them go, feeling an odd hollowness settle in his stomach. "Well, Galloway," Horace said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Seems you've had quite an adventure. Come have a drink and tell me all about it." Ryder followed his employer into the study, aware of Elizabeth's calculating gaze following him. He had a feeling that the complications in his life were just beginning. 3 days passed at the Silvercrest Ranch, days in which Zadie and Emma settled into a routine of recovery and rest. Zadie's ankle improved rapidly once it was properly tended, and Emma thrived under the attention of Maria, who proved to be a font of knowledge about infant care. Ryder, meanwhile, tried to return to his normal duties, supervising the ranch hands, checking the herd, maintaining the fences and outbuildings. But he found his thoughts continually drifting to the woman and child staying in the main house. Several times a day he manufactured reasons to stop by just to check on them, he told himself. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, he found Zadie sitting on the wide front porch, Emma asleep in a borrowed cradle beside her. She wore a simple blue dress that Elizabeth had reluctantly provided. The 2 women were of similar height, though Elizabeth's more generous figure meant the garment hung loosely on Zadie's slender frame. "How are you feeling?" Ryder asked, removing his hat as he approached. Zadie smiled, and Ryder felt something tighten in his chest. Her face had filled out slightly with proper food, and her hair, now clean and brushed, fell in dark waves around her shoulders. "Much better, thank you. Maria says I can start putting weight on the ankle tomorrow." Ryder nodded, settling into a chair beside her. "That's good news." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the ranch activities. In the distance, cowboys driving cattle from one pasture to another, a wagon returning from town with supplies. "Mr. Jenkins told me the sheriff rode out yesterday," Zadie said eventually, "about the stagecoach." "Yes, they found the wreckage right where you described, 4 bodies." Ryder watched her carefully. "No sign of the Mackenzie gang, though." Zadie's hands twisted in her lap. "Will they come after us? After me?" "Hard to say," Ryder answered honestly. "If they knew you escaped with the baby, maybe, but there's no reason to think they do. But if they find out I survived, that I could identify them." She left the thought unfinished, her eyes straying to Emma's sleeping form. "You're safe here," Ryder assured her. "The ranch is well protected." "I can't stay here forever, though," Zadie sighed. "I should try to reach my cousin in Tucson, let him know what happened." The thought of Zadie leaving caused a sharp pang in Ryder's chest, surprising in its intensity. "There's no rush," he said, perhaps too quickly. "Not until you're fully healed." She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Mr. Jenkins has been very kind, but I'm aware I'm imposing. And Miss Jenkins has made it quite clear that she considers my presence inconvenient." Ryder grimaced. Elizabeth had made no secret of her displeasure, viewing Zadie as both an unwelcome intrusion and a potential rival for Ryder's attention he had never encouraged her to expect. "Horace doesn't mind, neither do I." He hesitated, then added, "In fact, I've been thinking. The schoolteacher in Gold Hill is leaving at the end of the month, getting married and moving to California. The town will need a replacement." Hope flickered across Zadie's face. "A teaching position." "Here, it's not Tucson," Ryder acknowledged. "Smaller, rougher in some ways, but it's a good community, safe." He paused. "And you'd be close to people who care about you and Emma." The implication hung in the air between them. Zadie studied his face, her expression thoughtful. "People like you, Mr. Galloway," Ryder felt heat creep up his neck. "I just mean you wouldn't be alone. Maria's already half in love with Emma, and the town has a decent boarding house where you could stay until you found something more permanent." Zadie's smile widened slightly. "I'll consider it, thank you." Before Ryder could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. A rider was coming fast up the drive, raising a cloud of dust. Ryder stood, instantly alert. "Stay here," he said to Zadie, who had also risen, one hand protectively on Emma's cradle. The rider reined in sharply at the front of the house, one of the younger ranch hands, Jim Porter, his face flushed with exertion. "Mr. Galloway, Sheriff Wilson sent me. The Mackenzie gang hit the bank in Cottonwood this morning, killed 2 people. The young man paused to catch his breath. "And they're asking questions about a woman and baby, offering money for information." Ryder's blood ran cold. He glanced back at Zadie, who had gone pale. "Where are they now?" "Headed south, according to the sheriff. But he thinks they might swing by here. Says they know you brought survivors from the stagecoach to Silvercrest." "Someone talked," Ryder muttered, mind racing. "How many men?" "5, maybe 6. Sheriff's organizing a posse, but they won't be ready to ride until morning." Ryder nodded grimly. "Go tell Horace. Have Charlie and the boys bring in any cattle near the North Ridge. Everyone armed. And send someone to check on the line shacks, make sure our men are warned." As Jim hurried to comply, Ryder turned back to Zadie, who stood rigid with fear, one hand pressed to her mouth. "It's my fault," she whispered. "I've brought this danger to all of you." "No," Ryder said firmly, crossing to her in 2 strides. "This is not your fault, none of it." "They won't stop, will they?" Her eyes, wide with terror, found his. "Not until they find us." "They won't find you," Ryder promised. "I won't let them." Emma began to stir in her cradle, perhaps sensing her mother's distress. Zadie lifted her, holding her close. "What do we do?" she asked, and the trust in her voice both humbled and terrified Ryder. He wasn't sure he deserved it. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, thinking rapidly. "Not in the house, that's the first place they'll look." "The root cellar," came a voice from the doorway. Elizabeth stood there, her face uncharacteristically grave. "Behind the old cookhouse. No one's used it in years. Father had it reinforced last summer when there was talk of Apache raids." Ryder stared at her in surprise. Elizabeth had made no secret of her resentment toward Zadie. This offer of help was unexpected. "I don't like you much, Miss Blackburn," Elizabeth continued frankly. "But I won't see a mother and child harmed by those animals, not if I can help it." "Thank you," Zadie said quietly. Elizabeth nodded curtly. "I'll have Maria prepare some supplies, blankets, water, food for the baby." As she disappeared back into the house, Ryder turned to Zadie. "We'll move you after dark. Until then, stay inside, away from windows." "What about you?" she asked, her free hand catching his sleeve. "Ryder, these men are killers." The sound of his given name on her lips sent a jolt through him. "I've faced worse," he said, though in truth, he wasn't sure that was accurate. The Mackenzie gang was notorious for its brutality. "I can't bear the thought of anyone else dying because of me," Zadie's voice broke. "First the people on the stagecoach, now listen to me," Ryder interrupted, taking her gently by the shoulders. "You are not responsible for what these men do. You're a survivor, Zadie Blackburn, and I admire that more than I can say." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them and the sleeping infant between them. Ryder was acutely aware of his hands on her shoulders, of the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her borrowed dress. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I know," he replied, "but I made you a promise in that canyon and I intend to keep it. I've got you." Both of you." The day passed with agonizing slowness, every hour stretching like a week as they prepared for whatever the night might bring. Horace organized the ranch's defenses with the efficiency of a man who had survived the lawless early days of the territory. The women prepared the root cellar, making it as comfortable as possible with blankets, lanterns, and provisions. As dusk approached, Ryder found himself standing at the window of Horace's study, watching the road for any sign of approaching riders. Behind him, the rancher poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one across the desk toward Ryder. "Might be nothing happens," Horace said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Mackenzie might decide Silvercrest is too well defended." "Maybe," Ryder agreed, though he too had little faith in that outcome. He took a sip of the whiskey, welcoming its burn. "Thank you for standing with us on this." Horace waved away the gratitude. "Those bastards have terrorized this territory long enough. Besides, that young woman and her child deserve better than what fate's handed them so far." Ryder nodded, his thoughts turning to Zadie. In the brief time he'd known her, he'd come to admire her resilience, her fierce protectiveness of Emma, her quiet dignity in the face of hardship. And if he was honest with himself, there was more than admiration growing within him. "You care for her," Horace observed, his shrewd eyes missing nothing. "For both of them." Ryder didn't deny it. "I found them in that canyon for a reason, I think." "Maybe so," the older man agreed. "Life has a way of putting people in our path when we need them most and when they need us." Before Ryder could respond, Charlie appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Ryder coming, just one from the look of it." Ryder downed the rest of his whiskey and set the glass aside. "Let's go see what he wants." The 3 men moved to the front porch, where several ranch hands had already gathered, rifles at the ready. In the fading light, they could see a lone horseman approaching at a steady pace. "Not looking to surprise us, at least," Charlie muttered. As the rider drew closer, Ryder recognized him with a jolt of surprise. "That's Thomas Blackburn," he said. "Zadie's cousin from Tucson." The man reined in before the house, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. He was perhaps 40, with graying temples and a neat mustache. His clothes were travel-stained but of good quality. "I'm looking for Zadie Blackburn," he called. "I was told she might be here." Ryder exchanged glances with Horace, who gave a slight nod. "Who told you that?" Ryder demanded, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Sheriff Wilson in Gold Hill," the man replied. "I arrived in Tucson 3 days ago to meet Zadie's stagecoach. When she didn't arrive, I started asking questions, heard about the robbery." His voice caught. Is she alive, the baby? How do we know you're really Thomas Blackburn?" Charlie asked suspiciously. The man reached slowly into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded letter. "This is the last letter Zadie sent me, announcing her plans to come to Tucson after James's death." Ryder approached cautiously and took the letter. The handwriting matched the delicate script he'd seen Zadie use when she'd written a thank-you note to Maria the day before. "Wait here," he said, then turned and entered the house. He found Zadie in the kitchen with Maria and Elizabeth, preparing the last of the supplies for the root cellar. She looked up as he entered, instantly alert to his tension. "What is it?" she asked. "There's a man outside claiming to be your cousin, Thomas Blackburn." Ryder held out the letter. "He has this." Zadie took the letter, her eyes widening as she scanned it. "This is mine. I sent it to Thomas just before leaving San Francisco." She looked up at Ryder, hope and caution warring in her expression. "He's really here, seems so. Says he went to Tucson to meet you, got worried when you didn't arrive." Zadie handed Emma to Maria and moved toward the door. "I should see him." Ryder placed a hand on her arm. "Wait, it could still be a trap. The Mackenzies could have intercepted your letter or forced your cousin to lead them to you." She hesitated, then nodded. "What should we do?" "I'll bring him in, question him. If he's really your cousin, he'll know things about you that only family would know." Zadie agreed, and Ryder returned to the porch. After a brief consultation with Horace, they invited Thomas Blackburn inside, though Charlie and another ranch hand remained close, weapons ready. In the parlor, the man stood nervously, hat in hand, as Ryder studied him. There was a family resemblance to Zadie. He realized something about the shape of the eyes and the determined set of the jaw. "Mr. Blackburn," Ryder began, "we need to be certain you are who you claim to be. There are dangerous men looking for your cousin." "I understand," Thomas said. "Ask me anything." "What was Zadie's maiden name?" "Bennett. Zadie Bennett before she married James." "Where did she teach school?" "At Miss Porter's Academy for Young Ladies in Sacramento before her marriage." Ryder nodded, then asked the question he thought most telling. "Why did James Blackburn's father disapprove of their marriage?" Thomas's expression darkened. "Because Zadie's mother was half Mexican. Old man Blackburn was a bigot of the worst sort." It was the answer Ryder had suspected, and it explained much about Zadie's situation. In that moment, he was certain this man was indeed Thomas Blackburn. "Wait here," he said, then went to fetch Zadie. The reunion between the cousins was emotional, with Zadie breaking down in tears as Thomas embraced her. Emma, passed back to her mother's arms, studied the newcomer with solemn curiosity. "I thought I'd lost you too," Thomas said, his voice thick. "When I heard about the stagecoach." "Mr. Galloway found us," Zadie explained, looking toward Ryder with a warmth that made his heart skip. "He saved our lives." Thomas turned to Ryder, extending his hand. "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay, sir." Ryder accepted the handshake, though he felt a strange reluctance. Thomas's arrival complicated matters. If he took Zadie and Emma to Tucson as planned, Ryder might never see them again. "How did you find us?" Horace asked, bringing the conversation back to practical matters. "I've been tracking the stagecoach route backward," Thomas explained. "In Gold Hill, Sheriff Wilson told me he'd heard Ryder Galloway had brought survivors to Silvercrest Ranch." Ryder frowned. "Did the sheriff mention this to anyone else?" "I don't think so." "Why?" "Because the Mackenzie gang is asking questions about a woman and baby," Charlie interjected. "Offering money for information." Thomas's face paled. "My God. Then I've led them straight to you." Before anyone could respond, the distant sound of gunfire echoed from the direction of the north pasture. Ryder moved to the window, peering into the gathering darkness. "They're here," he said grimly, "and they're not coming in quiet." The next hours passed in a blur of violence and fear. The Mackenzie gang, 6 men in all, led by the notorious Silas Mackenzie himself, attacked the ranch with ruthless efficiency. They set fire to the barn as a diversion, then split up to approach the house from multiple directions. Ryder, Horace, and the ranch hands defended the property fiercely. 2 of the attackers were wounded in the initial exchange of gunfire, but the remaining 4 pressed on, determined to find Zadie, the only witness who could identify them. In the chaos, Ryder had barely had time to ensure Zadie, Emma, and the other women were safely hidden in the root cellar. Thomas had insisted on joining the defense, proving himself handy with a rifle despite his city upbringing. "They're circling around to the back," Charlie shouted over the sound of gunfire. He was crouched by a window, blood seeping from a graze on his shoulder. Ryder nodded grimly. "Horace, you and Jim hold the front. Charlie, Thomas, with me." They moved through the house to the kitchen, which faced the rear courtyard and the old cookhouse. Beyond it lay the root cellar where Zadie and Emma were hidden. Through the window, Ryder could see 2 figures moving in the shadows, approaching the cookhouse. His heart hammered against his ribs. If they discovered the cellar. "Cover me," he whispered to Charlie and Thomas. Then, without waiting for acknowledgement, he slipped out the back door. Moving silently, Ryder circled around the courtyard, using the darkness and his knowledge of the property to his advantage. He could hear the men's voices now, low and urgent. Mackenzie said, "Check everything. The woman's gotta be here somewhere." "What about that old building? Worth a look." Ryder positioned himself behind a water trough, took careful aim, and fired. One of the men cried out, clutching his arm. The second whirled, firing wildly in Ryder's direction. The bullets splintered the wood of the trough, sending fragments flying. From the house, Charlie and Thomas opened fire, providing covering fire as Ryder moved to a new position. The wounded man was retreating, but the second a tall figure Ryder recognized as Silas Mackenzie himself was advancing toward the cookhouse with determined steps. "I know you're here, woman." Mackenzie called into the darkness. "Make it easy on yourself and the kid. Come out now." Ryder circled behind a stack of firewood, trying to get a clear shot, but Mackenzie was moving erratically, using the cookhouse for cover. "Last chance," the outlaw shouted. "Or I burn this place to the ground with you in it." To Ryder's horror, Mackenzie produced a bottle likely filled with kerosene and a match. He had to act now, breaking from cover. Ryder charged, tackling Mackenzie just as he struck the match. They crashed to the ground, the bottle flying from the outlaw's grasp and shattering nearby, the kerosene spreading in a dangerous pool. Mackenzie was strong, fueled by desperation and rage. He landed a heavy blow to Ryder's jaw, momentarily stunning him. Then his hands found Ryder's throat, squeezing with murderous intent. "You should have minded your own business, cowboy," Mackenzie snarled, his face inches from Ryder's. Spots danced before Ryder's eyes as he struggled for air. His hand scrabbled in the dirt, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers closed around a jagged piece of the broken bottle. With the last of his strength, Ryder slashed upward. Mackenzie howled as the glass cut deep into his forearm, his grip on Ryder's throat loosening. Ryder bucked, throwing the outlaw off balance, then rolled away, gasping for air. Mackenzie staggered to his feet, blood streaming from his arm. He reached for his gun with his uninjured hand, but Ryder was faster. His own pistol cleared its holster in one smooth motion, and he fired twice. Mackenzie jerked backward, a look of surprise crossing his face. He took one stumbling step, then collapsed. In the sudden silence, Ryder became aware of shouting from the direction of the house. The other members of the gang, seeing their leader fall, were retreating. Ryder approached Mackenzie cautiously, gun still trained on the motionless figure. The outlaw's eyes stared sightlessly at the stars. The man who had terrorized the territory for years was dead. From the shadows of the cookhouse came a soft sound. Ryder whirled, then relaxed as he saw Zadie emerging. Emma clutched protectively to her chest. "It's over," he said hoarsely, his throat still painful from Mackenzie's grip. "They're running." Zadie crossed to him, her face etched with concern in the dim light. "You're hurt." "I'm all right," he assured her, though in truth his body was a catalog of injuries: bruised ribs, cut hand, battered face. She reached up, her cool fingers gentle against his swelling jaw. "You could have been killed." "Worth the risk," Ryder replied simply. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them: an understanding, a recognition of feelings that had been growing since that first encounter in the canyon. Ryder wanted to say more, to tell her how she and Emma had awakened something in him he thought long dead. But this was neither the time nor the place. "We should get back to the house," he said instead. "Make sure everyone is safe." The aftermath of the battle was chaotic but mercifully free of serious casualties among the defenders. One ranch hand had taken a bullet to the leg, and Charlie's shoulder wound required stitching, but no one had been killed. Of the Mackenzie gang, 2 were dead Silas and one of his men, and another critically wounded. The remaining 3 had fled into the night. Sheriff Wilson and his posse arrived shortly after dawn, having ridden through the night after hearing of the gang's movements. They took the wounded outlaw into custody and organized a search for the others. "You did good, Galloway," the sheriff said, surveying the damage to the ranch. "Real good. The territory's a safer place without Silas Mackenzie in it." Ryder merely nodded, too exhausted for conversation. He hadn't slept in over 24 hours, and the events of the night had taken their toll. All he wanted was to know that Zadie and Emma were truly safe. He found them in the parlor where Zadie was speaking quietly with Thomas. Emma, remarkably, was asleep in a makeshift cradle, apparently untroubled by the night's violence. Zadie looked up as Ryder entered, her face brightening. "There you are. I was worried." "Just helping the sheriff," he said, suddenly awkward in Thomas's presence. What happens now? Thomas answered, his expression thoughtful. That's what we've been discussing. I still have a position for Zadie in Tucson if she wants it. The school board was quite impressed with her credentials. Ryder felt his heart sink, though he tried not to let it show. Tucson's a good town, growing, safer than it used to be. It is, Thomas agreed. But Zadie tells me Gold Hill needs a teacher as well. Hope flared in Ryder's chest as he looked at Zadie. You're considering staying. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Emma and I have been through a lot to get here. It seems a shame to leave when we've just found people who care about us. The way she looked at him left little doubt about whom she meant. Ryder struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal too much of his feelings too soon. Gold Hill would be lucky to have you, he managed. Thomas watched their exchange with knowing eyes. Well, I need to return to Tucson in any case, business to attend to. But I'll be back to visit my cousin and grandniece regularly. He stood, extending his hand to Ryder. Take care of them, Galloway. They're all the family I have left. I will, Ryder promised, the words carrying more weight than a simple social nicety. After Thomas left to speak with the sheriff, Ryder and Zadie found themselves alone, Emma still sleeping peacefully nearby. For a moment neither spoke, the events of the past days hanging between them. You don't have to stay because you feel obligated, Ryder said finally. If Tucson is what you want, it's not obligation, Zadie interrupted softly. When you found us in that canyon, I was certain Emma and I were going to die there. You didn't just save our lives, Ryder, you gave us hope. She paused, gathering her courage. And in these few days, I've come to care for you, more than I thought possible after losing James. Ryder's heart thundered in his chest. Zadie, he broke off, uncertain how to express the tumult of emotions she stirred in him. I lost someone too, my wife, Catherine, and our unborn child. 7 years ago, understanding dawned in Zadie's eyes. That's why you came west, he nodded. I couldn't bear to stay where everything reminded me of them, so I ran as far as I could, built a life that was simple, solitary. He met her gaze directly, until I heard a baby crying in a canyon. Zadie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. We've both lost so much. Yes, Ryder agreed. But maybe we've found something too. He reached for her hand and she met him halfway, their fingers intertwining. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of possibility of a future neither had dared to imagine until now. I'd like to court you properly, Zadie Blackburn, Ryder said, his voice low and earnest. If you'll allow it. Her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. I'd like that very much, Ryder Galloway. Emma chose that moment to wake, announcing her presence with a demanding cry. Zadie laughed, the sound bright and hopeful in the morning light. Duty calls. As she moved to attend to her daughter, Ryder watched them both, a sense of rightness settling over him. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be gossip in town about the young widow and the ranch foreman, questions about Emma's future, practical matters of housing and income to arrange. But for the first time in 7 years, Ryder found himself looking forward rather than back. He had promised Zadie in that canyon, I've got you. What he hadn't realized then was how much she and Emma would come to have him heart, soul, and future. The Gold Hill schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with a fresh coat of white paint and a small bell tower. 6 months after the confrontation with the Mackenzie gang, it had become Zadie's domain, a place where the children of ranchers and shopkeepers, miners and blacksmiths gathered to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. Ryder sat atop Buck at the edge of the schoolyard, watching as the children spilled out at day's end. It was late May, and the desert was experiencing a rare bounty of wildflowers after spring rains. The mountains in the distance wore a soft purple haze, and the air was sweet with the scent of sage and mesquite. Zadie appeared in the doorway, Emma balanced on her hip. At 9 months old, the little girl was thriving, her dark curls and blue eyes a delightful combination of her mother's features. She spotted Ryder immediately and let out a squeal of delight, waving her chubby arms. The sound never failed to warm Ryder's heart. In the months since Zadie had accepted the teaching position in Gold Hill, he had become a fixture in their lives. He had helped find them a small house near the school, spent evenings reading to Emma while Zadie graded papers, and gradually, carefully, courted Zadie with a patience that surprised even himself. "How were they today?" Ryder asked as Zadie approached, referring to her dozen or so pupils. "Restless," she replied with a smile. The Harper twins brought a horned toad into the classroom, and young Billy Thompson announced he's quitting school to be a cowboy like his brother. Ryder chuckled, dismounting to walk beside her. "And what did you tell him?" "That even cowboys need to know their letters and figures unless they want to be cheated at every cattle sale." She shifted Emma to her other hip. He seemed to accept that logic. They walked together toward Zadie's house, a comfortable routine they had established. 3 evenings a week, Ryder would come to town after his work at the ranch was done, have dinner with Zadie and Emma, then return to his quarters at Silver Crest. On Sundays, they would attend church together, then spend the day as a family. It was proper, respectable, and increasingly insufficient for what Ryder felt for this woman and child. "I spoke with Reverend Daniels today," he said as they reached the white picket fence that bordered Zadie's yard. She glanced at him curiously. "Oh, what about?" Ryder took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, yet now that it was here, all his carefully planned words deserted him. "About us," he said simply. "About whether he'd be willing to perform a ceremony, if you were agreeable." Zadie stopped walking, her eyes widening. Emma, sensing the shift in atmosphere, went still in her mother's arms, watching them both with solemn interest. "Ryder Galloway," Zadie said softly, "are you proposing to me in the middle of the street?" He grimaced, suddenly aware of several townspeople watching with undisguised interest from the general store porch across the way. This wasn't how he'd planned it at all. "I'm making a mess of it, aren't I?" he admitted. "I had a whole speech prepared. About how you and Emma have brought light back into my life, how I want to be a father to her, a husband to you for as long as I live." Zadie's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "That sounds like a fine speech to me." Encouraged, Ryder reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I have this too. It was my mother's." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a modest diamond. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it carried the weight of family history and sincere intention. "Zadie Blackburn," Ryder said, his voice steadying as he found the words that mattered most. "I love you. I love Emma as if she were my own. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Zadie seemed unable to speak. Then she shifted Emma to one arm and reached out to touch Ryder's face gently. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." Emma, sensing the importance of the moment, patted Ryder's cheek with her small hand and declared, "Da." It was a sound she'd started making recently when he entered a room, and it never failed to fill his heart to bursting. Oblivious to their audience, which had grown to include most of the occupants of the general store and the blacksmith from across the street, Ryder leaned in and kissed Zadie softly. It wasn't their first kiss, but it held a new promise, a covenant for their future. A smattering of applause broke out, along with a few good-natured whistles. Zadie blushed, burying her face against Ryder's shoulder. "I think we've given the town something to talk about," she murmured. Ryder laughed, his arm around her waist as they continued toward the house. "Let them talk. I've got nothing to hide about how I feel for you and Emma." Later that evening, after Emma had been put to bed and they sat together on the small porch, Zadie grew thoughtful. "I never expected this," she said, looking at the ring now adorning her finger. "After James died, I thought my life would be about survival, about giving Emma the best life I could as a single mother." "You would have managed it," Ryder said with conviction. "You're the strongest person I know, Zadie." She smiled at him in the gathering dusk. "Perhaps, but I'm grateful I don't have to do it alone." She paused. "I've been thinking about what Emma called you today." "Da," Ryder repeated, warmth spreading through his chest at the memory. "Yes." "I've been wondering, would you want to adopt her? Legally, I mean, so she would be yours in every way. The question caught him off guard, though in retrospect it shouldn't have. Of course he wanted Emma to be his daughter in the eyes of the law as well as in his heart. "I would be honored," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But are you sure she's your last link to James?" Zadie shook her head. "Emma will always know about her birth father, I'll make sure of that. But you're the one who will raise her, the one who will teach her to ride and read and face the world. You're her father in all the ways that truly matter." Ryder had no words to express what her trust meant to him. Instead, he drew her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "When should we have the wedding?" he asked after a comfortable silence. "Soon," Zadie replied. "Before the school term ends in June, I think. That would give us the summer to settle in together." She looked at him curiously. "Where will we live, here in town, or?" "I've been thinking about that," Ryder admitted. "Horace has offered me a parcel of land on the eastern edge of Silver Crest. It's where the old foreman's house used to stand before it burned down a decade ago. Good location close enough to the ranch for my work, but only a 15-minute ride to town for your teaching." "He's giving you land?" Zadie asked, surprised. "Not exactly. He's selling it to me, but at a fair price. Says I've earned it with my years of service." Ryder hesitated. "There's more. He's offered me a partnership in the ranch." Zadie sat up straighter. "Ryder, that's wonderful. It's a small share to start," he cautioned. 5%, but with an option to increase it over time." He smiled at her excitement. "Seems Elizabeth's finally given up on me and accepted a proposal from that banker in Denver. Horace is thinking about his legacy." "I'm so happy for you," Zadie said, and he could see she truly meant it. "You deserve this after all your hard work." "We deserve it," Ryder corrected gently. "I wouldn't be the man I am now without you and Emma." They sat together as the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, planning their future with quiet excitement. A home to build, a family to raise, a life to share. From the tragedy of a stagecoach robbery had come the greatest blessing Ryder could have imagined: a second chance at love and family. And it had all begun with the cry of a baby in a canyon and 5 simple words: "I've got you." The wedding took place on the last day of the school term, a bright June morning that promised the heat of summer but hadn't yet delivered it in full force. The ceremony was held in the small church in Gold Hill, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Horace Jenkins stood as Ryder's best man, while Maria, who had become a dear friend to Zadie, served as matron of honor and held Emma during the service. Zadie wore a dress of pale blue silk, not white, as she had been married before, but no less beautiful for it. Emma, now crawling and attempting to stand, was dressed in a miniature version of her mother's gown, complete with a tiny circlet of wildflowers for her dark curls. As they exchanged their vows, Ryder found himself thinking of that day in the canyon, of how close he had come to riding past without hearing Emma's cries. One small sound had altered the course of 3 lives forever. "I, Ryder James Galloway, take thee, Zadie Elizabeth Blackburn, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he recited, his voice steady despite the emotion swelling in his chest. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Zadie's eyes shone with tears as she repeated the vows, her voice clear and certain. When Reverend Daniels pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled townspeople nearly drowned out the church bells. The celebration afterward was held at Silvercrest Ranch, in the shade of cottonwood trees that lined the creek. Tables groaned with food prepared by the women of Gold Hill, and a small band of local musicians provided lively tunes for dancing. As evening approached, Ryder found himself standing slightly apart, watching as Zadie moved among their guests, Emma on her hip. His wife and daughter, the words still felt like a miracle each time he thought them. "You look happy, Galloway," came Horace's voice as the older man joined him. "Suits you." Ryder smiled. "It feels good." "Got the foundation started on your house yesterday," Horace informed him. Crew says they'll have the frame up by the end of next week, weather permitting. Thank you, Ryder said, meaning it for more than just the construction update. Horace had been more than an employer, he'd become a mentor and friend. The older man waved away the gratitude. You've earned it. Besides, I'm looking forward to having you closer to the ranch again. Town's a bit far for a foreman. Partner, Ryder corrected with a grin. Junior partner, Horace retorted, but his eyes twinkled good-naturedly. Very junior. Their conversation was interrupted as Charlie approached, looking uncharacteristically nervous in his Sunday best. Sorry to intrude, boss, he said to Horace. But there's a situation with the new mares in the South Paddock. Horace sighed. No rest for ranchers, even on a wedding day. He clapped Ryder on the shoulder. Enjoy your celebration, son. The honeymoon cottage is all prepared for you three. As Horace departed, Zadie made her way to Ryder's side, Emma now drooping sleepily against her shoulder. I think someone's had enough excitement for one day, she said softly. Ryder brushed a finger over Emma's flushed cheek. She's not the only one. Ready to see our temporary home? The honeymoon cottage was in fact a comfortable guest house on the Silvercrest property where they would stay until their own home was completed. Horace had insisted they use it, giving them privacy while keeping them close to the ranch operations. As they made their excuses to their guests, slipping away as the celebrations continued, Ryder felt a profound sense of contentment. The path that had brought him here had been marked by loss and grief, but also by unexpected joy. In the cottage, they settled Emma in the small nursery that Maria had lovingly prepared. The little girl went down easily, exhausted from the day's events. When Ryder and Zadie were finally alone, he took her in his arms, still hardly believing this remarkable woman was now his wife. Mrs. Galloway, he murmured against her hair. Zadie's arms tightened around him. It still doesn't seem real after everything. It's real, he assured her. And it's just the beginning. Later, as moonlight spilled through the cottage windows and Zadie slept peacefully beside him, Ryder found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. From the moment he'd heard a baby's cry echoing in a canyon, his life had been irrevocably changed. He had lost faith in happiness once, had believed that some losses could never be redeemed. But fate, or providence, or simple human connection had proved him wrong. In finding Zadie and Emma, he had also found himself again the man he was meant to be, the life he was meant to lead. The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising. Their house was completed by summer's end, a sturdy, comfortable home with room for their family to grow. Ryder's partnership in Silvercrest prospered as cattle prices rose and the ranch expanded its operations. Zadie continued teaching, beloved by the children of Gold Hill and respected by their parents. Emma thrived in their care, growing from a baby to a curious, adventurous toddler who delighted in following Ryder around the ranch and sitting on Zadie's lap during story time at school. On her second birthday, Ryder officially adopted her, making her Emma Galloway in the eyes of the law as well as in his heart. And then, in the spring of 1876, their family expanded again with the birth of a son, James Thomas Galloway, named for Zadie's first husband and her cousin, who remained a faithful correspondent and occasional visitor. As Ryder held his newborn son for the first time, Emma peering curiously at her baby brother from her perch on his knee, he felt a completeness he had once thought impossible. "He has your eyes," Zadie said from the bed, tired but radiant after the delivery. "And your determination," Ryder replied, noting the strong grip of the tiny fingers around his own. "He'll be a handful." Like his father, she teased, life was not without its challenges. The frontier remained a place of hardship and occasional danger. There were droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that swept through town, the constant work of building a life in a still wild land. But through it all, Ryder and Zadie faced each day together, their love deepening with shared joys and sorrows. Emma grew into a thoughtful, compassionate girl who showed her mother's intelligence and her adoptive father's quiet strength. Young James, or JT, as he came to be called, was indeed a handful fearless and curious, with a knack for finding trouble and a smile that could charm his way out of consequences. And in 1879, the family welcomed another addition, a daughter they named Catherine Maria, for Ryder's first wife and the woman who had become like a grandmother to their children. On the day of Catherine's christening, as the extended family and friends gathered to celebrate, Ryder found himself momentarily apart, watching the scene with a full heart. Horace, now in his 70s but still sharp-minded, bounced little Catherine on his knee while Emma, at 6 years old, solemnly helped 4-year-old JT straighten his collar. Zadie moved among their guests, her face alight with happiness. "Penny for your thoughts," came her voice as she approached. Having noticed his momentary solitude, Ryder smiled, drawing her close. "Just thinking about that day in the canyon, how differently things might have gone if I hadn't heard Emma crying." Zadie leaned into him, her head against his shoulder in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "I've thought about that too, so many small moments that had to align just so." "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Not making it to Tucson, not having the life you planned?" She looked up at him, surprise evident in her expression. "Never, not for a moment." Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "This is the life I was meant to have. You, the children, our home. It's more than I ever dared to hope for." Ryder bent to kiss her, still marveling at how this woman had transformed his world. "Me too," he said simply. As they rejoined their guests, Emma running to them with JT in tow, Ryder thought about the words he had spoken in that canyon 6 years before. "I've got you." They had been a promise made in a moment of crisis, but they had become the foundation of a life together, a reminder that in a harsh and unpredictable world, the greatest safety lay in loving and being loved in return. And as he gathered his family close, Ryder knew with absolute certainty that he would keep that promise for all the days of his life.